to our guests, dignitaries, faculty members and their families, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. It has been said, learning never exhausts the mind. Keeping these words in mind, I, Maheshi Das,
And I, Ishita Chaudhary,
of PGP Batch 2224, on behalf of IIM Raipur, welcome you all to the 5th chapter of IIM Raipur's monthly intellectual series, Gyan Varsha, presenting rock stars of India. This series brings together academia, industry, and purpose-driven speakers in an informal, intellectual, and social environment. It aims to help us engage with visionaries, innovators, and leaders who have dedicated their life for betterment of our country, making them the true rock stars of India. Before we begin, I would request Professor Anupa Dadich to please welcome our guest speaker for the evening, Mr. Yogi Sriram with bouquet.
coaching and mentoring. We are honored to have Mr. Yogi Sriram as our guest speaker for today. He is a person of many talents. He is currently working as an advisor to CEO and MD Group Human Resources at L&T and has a diverse leadership experience of about 45 years across various organizations. He has introduced many innovative HR policies. One of them is FAIR, which stands for Framework for Linking of Appraisals, Incentives and Rewards. It has evolved into a digital system with goals and performance conversations that are recorded in a paperless process. He has been conferred with various Lifetime Achievement Awards and has also been admitted into the Hall of Fame, which is an award instituted in the memory of Dr. Vikram Sarabhai. He is the board member of various prestigious committees and institutions. He is currently trying to bring in a lawful mandate for organizations to hire a chartered professional in HR in a statutory role. However, these are not the only feathers in his cap. He has an interest in sports and creativity. Sir is an avid boxer, a keen photographer, and a collector of model prints. He is an intuitive, disciplined, meticulous, and a punctual leader. Sir, the stage is all yours.
Here, Dr. Jain, and all your wonderful, wonderful colleagues. I won't reel off all their names because the entire faculty of OB and HR and also the others who met me from right from today morning have been so kind. Thank you very much. And it's wonderful, wonderful to see all of you here. I'm going to be talking about this topic, and I agreed to talk about this topic because it is a 21st century skill. And while I don't know whether some of you will become professional coaches and mentors, and who knows, you might, I think this is a skill which is extremely important for you to inculcate so that you are successful in your career. I was discussing today morning that there's so many people who learn domain skills, you learn about cost of capital, you learn about finance, you learn about various theories and stuff in marketing. But I think what is very, very important is soft skills. And I think chief amongst the soft skills, of course, critical thinking is something people talk about. They also talk about logical reasoning, judgment, and so on. But your ability to coach and mentor is extremely, extremely important. Now the problem is that these words mean different things to different people, but we are not going to spend half the evening in trying to analyze only the differences, though we'll touch on them. But I'll try to dwell upon what are the various usages of this term. By the way, there is a third term also to complicate life a little more, which is counseling. Counseling is getting into somebody's frame of reference, understanding how the person feels. And in counseling, which I think is also a very important soft skill, though Professor Jain has not asked me to talk about counseling, you could become a very good friend, guide and philosopher as a counselor. What's the problem? The problem with counseling is most of us have very stultified and short vocabulary with respect to feeling words. Somebody comes into your room and says, I am disappointed, I am very, very angry, I am feeling helpless. These are feeling words. Your ability to label the feeling word is so important. If somebody is feeling absolutely mad about what's happened, and you say, you look a little upset, it will go upside down. So therefore, in counseling, learning about using the right feeling word is extremely important. Because remember, all of us have our own psychological drawing rooms. If I come into your drawing room and say, "वो painting थोड़ा टेढ़ा लग रहा है," would you like it? You invited me to your house for a cup of coffee, and I give you unsolicited feedback that, look, your painting in that wall looks a little wonky, or there's color scheme in the sofa doesn't look good. Won't work. So therefore, the first step is to get into your psychological drawing room. And getting into your psychological drawing room in counseling means labeling the feeling word. So let's think about a situation like this, which you will face again and again in your careers. Your subordinate comes to you and say, let's say your name is Nirupama. Nirupama, again, or ma'am, because you are in a hierarchical situation, ma'am, I haven't got promoted once again. I haven't got promoted once again. This is really bad. You dropped me again. What are the responses? 1. Don't worry, after 6 months we'll see again. Usual response. Or after 1 year, maybe you'll get promoted again. Or maybe you'll get a promotion chance after 1 year. The second response. Can you tell me when you got last promoted? When did you join? Isn't it too early? But tell me, I want to go through the records. Which of your peers have got promoted so fast? This is the second response. The third response. You know what? Even I'm feeling like really bad. Even they dropped me also. I'm really feeling terrible. The fourth response. You know, I advise you to be a little calm. Don't be so excited and don't get so upset. The fifth response. I want to understand how you feel because your feeling is very important to me. Which response do you think is the most important here to get into the psychological drawing room? Is it the probing response? No. Is it the advising response? Absolutely no. Is it the supporting response? Look what happened to you, look what happened to me. Both of us need counselors. Is that the response? Absolutely no. It's the understanding response that counts. So that's about counseling. But when you go to a mentor, there are different types of mentors. There are different types of coaches that you have. Mentoring and coaching is not giving advice, unless of course you're going to an expert. You know why I'm wearing dark glasses? I recently went through an eye surgery. That's why I'm wearing dark glasses. For those colleagues who don't know about this from the morning, I've been applying drops, and that's the reason. So if I go and ask the eye doctor who performed the surgery as recently as 25th of January, that look, you know something, I don't think the right thing to do for me is to wear extended depth of field lenses. Extended depth of field lenses? I don't think you're right, ma'am. She's going to throw me out because she's an expert in that area. So when we talk about mentorship, there is a difference between going to an expert for getting advice and mentorship, which is what we're going to talk about. Now, some people think that mentorship is something to do with age. You know, you are all young guys out here. Maybe max 3, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, exceptionally 10 years experience. Many of you are freshers. So can you mentor anyone? Answer is big yes. Mentoring has nothing to do with age. Mentoring is all about your ability to relate with the person, your chemistry, your ability to transact business with the person without making that person feel that you're ordering that person or you're being cheeky, etc. And mentoring is not the usual stereotype कि किसी को Excel का pivot table नहीं मालूम, somebody at the senior level in age, therefore you go and mentor that person. And you do reverse mentoring by teaching that person about pivot tables. That is one part of mentoring. You can also mentor a person on life skills, by the way. It's not necessary that everybody who has age behind them is absolutely wise. And reverse mentoring, while it has a role in transfer of knowledge and in transfer of a domain skill, mentoring could also happen from a younger person to an older person on life skills. It's nothing to do with age. So a mentor is somebody who is like a friend, guide, and philosopher, and that is very important for us to understand. At some stage, mentoring is the art of asking the right kind of questions, and so is coaching. So I'm going to start using them a little bit interchangeably. Now, in the example that I gave you on counseling, you don't start asking questions from day one or from the first hour that you meet the person. You gradually settle down your understanding of that person's frame of reference, and then you start asking the questions. And the questions are not to probe, not to make the person feel small. The questions are to get the best out of the person's ability to think and to make the person independent of you, not dependent on you. You don't want to create an emotional crutch for that person. And then coaching, there's of course domain coaching. You have IIT classes for coaching and you have CAT classes for coaching. That's a different ballgame altogether. That's on domain. So these words can be used in different contexts, and we are going to talk about it in the context of you becoming great leaders, or at least showing good leadership behaviors. Because after spending 45 and a half years in HR, I've realized that the difference between a successful career and not so successful one is a host of hot skills, soft skills, amongst which the most hot skill, according to me, is coaching and mentoring. And the consequence of perhaps of not knowing these soft skills and practicing them is that I've seen many people, please don't take me amiss or don't throw a rotten tomato at me, many people who are the so-called IIT, IIM guys, they fall off the corporate perch in the 40s. When they're 40 or so, something happens, they get decelerated. It's not just EQ, it's social intelligence. And a very important part of social intelligence is how you can become a great coach. So what is coaching? Coaching is about how you enable your team members to reach their full potential. I saw today in IIM Raipur that there was such a cheerful atmosphere, and compliments to you, Professor Jain. Very cheerful atmosphere in the whole department, no fear, people exchanging views and so on, pulling each other's leg in a friendly manner and so on. So I think helping people to reach their full potential is a very important part of coaching. And as the baby boomers, come in more and more into the organization, you will find that coaching is a very, very important skill. Baby boomers and the people who are, actually very young people, Gen Z, baby boomers are the more experienced ones. Okay, they were born during the baby boom time. And then you find more and more people coming into the organization, meaning the young ones are becoming baby boomers, or it's just an expression that they're becoming older. So there are generational differences. So to understand the generational differences, I think one has to have a huge shift in leadership style. What is the number one enemy of a leadership style that does not promote a coaching culture? It's a command and control culture. It will never work in for coaching. Because when you have a command and control culture, the power distance, just to use some stuff which your OB professors will be teaching you about, Hofstede, I think the person is. When you use command and control, the power distance increases. And when the power distance increases, you're pushing people away. You're not bringing them closer to you. And I suppose the first time that this term knowledge worker was used was in the year 1950, when Peter Drucker, most of you may not even have heard of Peter Drucker, but in my generation we all heard about him because he was the guru of management. And he used this term, knowledge worker, when we didn't even know what the meaning is. Today we call those who work in the IT sector as the knowledge worker. And that is really complex. I posed a question today morning to the colleagues who met me. The question was as follows, and maybe some of you can give me an answer. 50% of the people who are employed today, almost 50% in mid-sized IT companies, were hired during the pandemic. 50% may not have seen the company portal, not an IT portal, I'm talking about the lobby, the portals of the office and so on. 50% of them have got shipped a laptop and a backpack and a water bottle and a pad and stuff. They don't even know your company. And at the same time, there is anguish about the great resignation and people leaving left, right and center and attrition which has now come down from maybe 24 to 18%, 17% or so. But how do you understand this young generation is very important, and your ability to empathize. We talked about this today morning. Your ability to listen without an intent to reply. You know, it's very easy for me to stand in a town hall. I'm a powerful guy, I'm an executive vice president or a senior vice president. I talk down at you, like now, physically. It's very easy for me to throw that attitude in terms of, power. But it's very difficult to establish the chemistry unless one becomes, let's say, in unison in understanding what is going on in that young person's mind. Aspirationally, that young person who's working out of Raipur or Indore doesn't want to come to Mumbai because of why? If you want to be a little mischievous, maybe the person wants to moonlight. If you want to be more practical, the person doesn't want to change because of housing reasons. So understanding what is exactly going on is in terms of an insight in the person's mind is very important, and I suppose the knowledge workers are going to be it's very key to understand what's going on in their mind in order to be a good coach. So what does it mean to conceptualize leadership as coaching? It's a nice acronym. First is care for your teammates. They can see phony care, You have to be extremely genuine in terms of the care that you give, and it's a cultural thing. Today I could see a lot of care being given to your colleagues. Organize them so that they can play with their sweet spot, what they're good at. If someone is good at a particular calling, put that person in that kind of a job, whether it's writing a code or writing an algorithm or whatever it is. Align them with the organization purpose and values. Challenge them to reach their full potential. Now some coaches, especially in games, they really push the young people to attain. For example, recently was it Shivani Verma, who was the girls team under 19 captain. I am sure she got pushed a lot by the coach. So come on, take that catch during practice, and she took some amazing catches. So there are some coaches in sport who really challenge you to reach your full potential, and you amaze yourself. At this point, I want to talk about an author whom I think I mentioned to some of you today, who is Carol Dweck. And if some of you have Google with you, please Google it, not right now, but after you finish. Carol Dweck talks about something called the growth mindset. The growth mindset means you have faith in the other person that the person can grow, and you don't write off that person saying, "Ye to aise hi hai, kabhi sudharega nahi." Or you don't even do that with yourself. You have self-confidence to grow is what is the growth mindset. So when your person comes to you disappointed, saying that, I haven't got promoted as yet, and so on, she talks about the not yet answer. If you see some of her YouTube, it's very interesting. Rather than saying, you don't deserve it right now, wait for some time, the not yet answer is very powerful. So the growth mindset is having faith and giving faith to that person that you can grow into this position. Just try harder, I'll help you, I'm by your side. Some of the examples of great coaches is Bill Campbell. He's the coach of the Columbia University's football team, legendary coach, and he's also called the coach of Silicon Valley. But these people have changed lives. They've made people perform at never before kind of levels, and everybody, including the great Sachin Tendulkar, has had a great coach. So that's in the context of sport. So you can have a coach in terms of sport. I am talking to you in the context of being leaders and managers and developing a soft skill where people come to you. Tell me, how many of you felt lonely? Don't care, huh? You felt lonely at some point in time. Everybody, everybody, everybody. And thank you for being honest about it. Thank you for being honest about it. When you're lonely, does your best friend just appear from nowhere? When you're looking for that person? Absolutely no. A good coach who has the skills to appear before that person saying, hey, what's wrong? Is everything okay? Are you feeling good? How do you feel today? A good coach is somebody you go to. Have you noticed in your hostels, there's some people whose room is a adda? Yes or no? And some people's room nobody goes. No derogatory remarks concerning the person where nobody goes. But there's some people whose chemistry works. They draw people towards them. And I suppose when you're talking about this world which is getting more and more lonely, most of you belong to double income, single kid kind of families or maximum 2 kids in the family. Your nuclear families are getting dismantled, joint families are very few. It's a lonely world. The only crutch you can weigh upon is, that is not your generation, maybe one generation before you, is Facebook and stuff like that. But it's difficult to be there, especially when you become a CEO, because you don't have anybody there to fall back upon. So it's a very, very lonely world, and this is not a cliche, that you gets more lonely as you get up there. So therefore, another form of coaching is a very, very, very expensive form called executive coaching, especially for CEOs in the international context. When you talk about the Indian context, it may not be that expensive, but when you talk about international context, extremely expensive. And they do a great job with these coaches. So a coach typically in the context of international coaching listens, paraphrases, understands, gives you feedback about how you feel, how he feels or she feels about how you're performing in a meeting. That's what the coach does. Are you making an impact? Are you somebody who's just using a whole lot of hubris and dismissing ideas? Are you listening carefully? So that's what the coach does. I have to talk about the technical differences between coaching and mentoring, because that's a part of the entire process today evening, of also telling you what the technical differences are. Typically, coaching is much more short term. It's more about performance, it's more about role, it's more about skills required. It's much more about performance because it's task oriented. It facilitates learning. You push an individual to learn something that the person has not been learning so far. It doesn't require a formal design. A mentorship program typically needs a design, it's longer and so on. And the immediate superior typically is a part of the coaching program. You normally sit with the immediate superior and figure out what should be the coaching remedy. Here is something very, very important. In your performance management lessons, you must have heard about 360 degrees feedback. Have you heard about it? Some people talk about 270 where the customer is excluded. You have the boss, you have the peers, you have the subordinate. You also have 180 degrees where you have the subordinates excluded, you have the customer excluded, so you have only the peers. I have actively done some very, very involved and immersive work with 180 degrees feedback, and also done, introduced in the feedback sessions, the boss's perception about what a person feels. In this kind of mentoring, what you typically do is, you go through a discovery phase and you establish 6 or 7 competencies that are very, very important for your success in the organization. And then you do the 180 degrees feedback, and supposing I am being measured on something called interpersonal chemistry, which means how do I relate with people? Am I socially awkward? Do I use the right kind of language? Am I patient? Do I listen well? There'll be 6 people who will give me comments. There'll be 6 people who will give me a score, which is maybe on a rating scale of 1:5. And then what do you do statistically? Somebody talk about what you do statistically. You take the average, right? You take the average or no? Faculty can also tell. You take the average, right? And you take the average and give the person a feedback. So if it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 5, 3, whatever it is, you add up all that, divided by the number of respondents, and that is the feedback that you do. I'm told that IIM Raipur has a lot of quanti people. Is there anything else that you can use for giving feedback? Hello? Anything else that you can use for giving feedback? Standard deviation. Why? The deviation from the mean will tell you about the variance from the central measure, which is arithmetic mean. Why is that important? Because when you're giving me feedback, one of the very important parts of giving feedback is to also see whether the person is consistent in terms of behavior. Very servile with the boss, right? Very rude with subordinates. Is it consistent? It's inconsistent. And therefore you get varying kind of feedback. So therefore, standard deviation is also very important, which one is used in practical life. Mentoring is relationship based. It's focused on the person and their career. It facilitates individual growth. It's much more long term. It requires a design, and normally in mentoring, the immediate boss is not involved. Now there's a difference between teaching. Now some of your faculty may be teaching you a particular subject. There's a big difference between teaching and mentoring. What is the difference? In teaching, you're told, you're directed, you're instructed. The teacher is the boss. Of course, there is something called asynchronous and synchronous learning. I mean, you can do both. But when you have an expert who's teaching you, it is more instruction based. It is not making you totally independent at that point of time. You are kind of dependent on the teacher, especially if it is something like, STEM, which is being taught to you, math or something like that. You are kind of dependent on the person. There is some amount of instruction, and the teacher provides answers. What's the difference in mentoring? A mentor never provides answers, very rarely advises, and a coach certainly doesn't. Both these people, whether it's a coach or a mentor or a counselor or all these three, they help you in getting the right answers. So therefore, there is something called self-directed counseling or self-directed coaching, which is meaning that you help the person to grow to a particular level where the person can deal with the problem, can find solutions and so on. So the skill of asking the right kind of questions is very, very important. So therefore, what you see in this diagram and you see in the VEN, V-E-N-N, you see there an overlap. So coaching is much more short-term, it's much more skill, knowledge, behavior-oriented, whereas mentoring is much more broadening perspectives and long-term. And of course, there is an overlap, but that doesn't matter. Both of them coalesce in a way in the VEN. So the role of a mentor is to listen. Now, listening is very important. I mean, everybody talks about listening. Are you guys listening? I don't think so. Some of you are not. You're nodding at each other, you're looking at each other, you're smiling at each other. Please continue to do that if you're listening. But you're not really listening, but you're listening to have fun, some of you. You're listening to also have a conversation with people around you. It's damn hard to listen because, your attention, by the way, is better than mine. Your attention is perhaps 8 seconds or so, like a goldfish. You look around here and there for entertainment, you look around here and there for friends, you look around here and there for what is that guy saying and doing. Is he hearing me as much as I am? That's the world. So listening is really hard. You need a kind of a discipline. And one of the things you can do to practice listening is become a parrot. Sorry, I'm being playful with that, but become a parrot. When somebody tells you something, learn to repeat it exactly the way this person has said it. Don't add any masala here and there. Say it the same way. Even if it's a full paragraph, you'll see you'll fall flat on your face the first few times. But it's a great way to entering the frame of reference. Because when you're listening without the intent to reply, because what is the normal way of a leader thinking or a manager thinking? Jawab dunga, fitting jawab dunga. I'm a smart guy, so I am right. They've given me all the quantitative skills. Even before that person has finished the sentence, I'm going to talk. That's the normal way, isn't it? But listening is really listening with the intent to dig out. Listening is with the intent to really get into the person's frame of reference. Listening is with deep, deep empathy, and in giving and receiving feedback, it's very important. Now, when you're receiving feedback also, and I'm sure that must have been taught to you in class, a coachee or a mentee also has a particular duty. The duty is very simple. You have to be there on time for the class, whether it is, for the coaching session or the mentoring session. Have an open mind, don't be defensive, don't rationalize things, I am like this only is rationalizing things. If you don't want to improve, just ditch the coach and ditch the mentor. Don't be wasting his time, her time, and your time. So the role of a mentor is to question, find facts, help the person grow to a different level. You're not getting into a power game, to find facts, not to put the person down, but to really make the person think of unusual things that the person has not thought of, out of the box thinking. Guide on career development, offer different perspectives, offer support and encouragement. All of you raised your hands when you said it's a lonely world. It is. You will go through lots of troughs and peaks during your career, let me tell you. And when you don't go through a proper, when you go through a trough, it's really hard. You feel miserable, friends are not there, they just make clucking sounds, you look a little down, they don't understand you fully, and this can go on for days and days and days, and then it becomes a bit of an anxiety racket, and then it can become even worse, because depression can drive you to do things which you wouldn't like to do. So therefore, it's very important for a mentor to make you feel validated psychologically and to check their understanding. They share that you have to share your thoughts. And of course, for that, a lot of trust is required. If there is a mentor who is irresponsible with the information he or she has, it's disastrous. I think it's a fantastic way to learn today. There are various learning theories, by the way. And today, when you're talking about hybrid and you're talking about asynchronous and synchronous learning, and you're talking about LXPs, all of you know what is LXPs. It's a learning system which is a recommendatory learning system, which is where, like Amazon, nuggets of information are thrown at you. What is very, very important is to have a mentor who can guide you. We have something called Coach Vani, for example, in L&T, which is an excellent way to guide people to use the right kind of language with their internal and external customers. So that is a very, very important part of today's mentorship in today's context. Be open to new perspectives. You don't want to be old-fashioned and think about something that happened 40 years back or 30 years back and say it's absolutely taboo. For example, the way people are looking at some of the things, some of the HR trends which are happening today are a very different way than what they were used to look at it earlier. Earlier it would be totally indisciplined or bracketed under the word indiscipline. Today it's being bracketed under the word phenomena. Taking responsibility for their own development and of course getting the most from the relationship. So the qualities that you need as a mentor, and by the way, you need these qualities even as a good human being, you need these qualities as a good manager, as a good leader, as a person who can be trusted. You need these qualities anyway. Integrity. What is integrity? Integrity is not having a loose tongue. Integrity is making sure that you don't blab about what the other person has told you. That is core to counseling, core to coaching, core to mentorship. Extremely important. Honesty is a little different. Honesty means you are also sometimes making yourself vulnerable by sharing your own pitfalls. You can't get the best out of a mentee or a coachee unless you also share that you also have been vulnerable and you went through a particular situation. You don't have to cook up the situation, but you can talk about what happened to you and how you dealt with that situation. Reliability. You can't be a fair weather friend. As a friend, guide, and philosopher, you need to be there when the person needs you. The person may need you most in a particular situation, and mentorship means being available. Non-judgmental. Non-judgmental means suspending your judgment. Not saying good, bad, ugly just because the person comes from a particular region or comes from a certain economic background or belongs to a particular gender. All these people of this gender have this problem at this age. That's a generalization. It's making a general judgment. Non-judgmental means suspending your judgment, which is not easy. Why? because all of us have something called biases. Now, all biases are not bad, some biases are good, but all biases have this danger. In fact, people have written books on the kind of biases that people can have which make projects delayed and so on. Kahneman and Tversky have written Thinking Fast and Slow. I hope you guys have heard of it. Which is all about biases, okay? So some biases can be terrible. Optimism bias, for example, which they write about, is terrible. And all of us have our biases. So therefore, being non-judgmental is being aware of your biases. How can you be aware of your biases? Anyone wants to tell me about? How do you figure out? You go to a doctor and say, "मेरे को bias बताओ क्या है मेरा bias." You don't do that, right? So you must understand what really, if I may use that word, pisses you off most. Really frustrates you. No? You hate it. This person does something which I can't stand. That is 100% the beginning of a bias. Try to understand what is it that really upsets you, frustrates you, and that's the beginning of understanding what is it that is my bias and how do you become more non-judgmental. Objectivity. Objectivity means, of course, without bias, but objectivity means your ability to think through a problem without getting too emotionally connected. Look, when you're a mentor and when you're a coach and when you're a counselor, you need to have emotion, but you need to be in full control about how you use those emotions. If you can use those emotions to become more empathic, you're fine. But if both of you need another counselor, it doesn't help. Because, it'll be quite, yeah, exactly. I mean, it'll be quite funny, both of you need, chalo hum bhi chalte hain aapke saath dusre counselor ke saath. So that's not very functional. So I think the ability to be strong, the ability to use your emotion in living through that experience, and perhaps you can talk about it in a very terrible, if it's a very terrible experience to somebody else, if it upsets you. I must tell you that there are social workers, especially in my alma mater, who passed out, who work in very, very difficult places. They worked with child abuse, they worked with women abuse, they worked with all kinds of stuff, which is, when they come back after what we call as fieldwork training, Professor Jain, in Tata Institute and other places, it's difficult. So you need to have someone to talk about as a case. You can't disclose what happened to whom, but you can talk about how you feel and how you would cope if that becomes, it's very, very traumatic. So therefore, your skill in being objective and separating the facts from emotion in times like that is very, very important. And of course, the growth mindset. Who did I talk about? Carol Dweck. She has the growth mindset. She says, move away from the fixatedness that you can't move, you can't improve, to the growth mindset. So the role of a mentor is to be an expert, near peer, peer or reverse, guidance and moral support, career guidance, short to mid-term, sometimes short to mid-term, sometimes long-term, but I would say mentorship is much more long-term as compared to coaching. Alleviating stress, being a trusted colleague, being non-judgmental, advice on practical issues. The advice is the last part. After you've understood the problem fully, if the person seeks your advice, why not? Role modeling, being a sounding board, all these are essential mentor characteristics. So therefore, when you talk about mentee needs, you could be a mentee, you could be a mentor. What is a mentee's need? Why do I come to a mentor? I need your support, Mr. Mentor, Mrs. Mentor, for supporting my role or my life transition. I'm going into retirement. I need your mentorship. So you could do some reverse mentoring. Why don't you start with hobby? Why don't you do something different? I'm going through a role transition because I'm going through a divorce. Why don't you, advise the person or deal with the feelings of the person about this life transition? Or I'm going through a life transition because one of my near ones is suffering from a life-threatening disease. All these are life transitions, and therefore you could categorize them as common mentee needs. Developing personal or professional insight. I was telling some of the colleagues today morning that L&T has the distinction of doing something like 20,000 development centers. We call it development center these days to make it non-threatening. And the need to be a mentor, a coach to those who don't make it in the assessment center or the development center is very, very high. So therefore, understanding what are the strengths of the person, understanding how does the person develop strategic decision making abilities, risk management abilities, critical thinking abilities, thinking out of the box, being more creative. All these are very important in coaching and mentoring. It's a different form of coaching and mentoring, but a very common mentee need. You too will go through an assessment center at some point of your life, especially in professional companies these days. They insist on the development center or assessment center outcome before they promote you. Challenging assumptions. Now, mentees usually come with a certain, fixed kind of an assumption or a mindset and so on. I think a good mentor's job is to challenge those assumptions. And a mentee working towards goals, it's very important that mentees have a purpose in life. Everybody's talking these days about a larger purpose. So understanding what is that purpose, working towards that purpose, identifying it, however diffused it looks like, very important. Working through change, working with complexity, navigating ambiguity, building resilience and self-esteem. All these are, today the situation is so fluid in many of the things that we think about and talk about, including the stock market. You need to have fantastic judgmental abilities, particularly when it comes to business. And of course, there is a whole lot one can do in terms of learning how to make a good judgment. But this is a common mentee requirement and also a very common mentor, what the mentor can give to the mentee. So being a role model, which is Levinson 1978, behavior is observed from a distance. We are talking now about a mentor being a role model, because your behavior is also being observed. You can also be a mentor without having direct contact all the time like a mentor. You can be a mentor by being a role model to the mentee. Display and establish certain practices and qualities that are admired. And the mentee can make a conscious choice whether to inculcate those qualities or not. But then you can be a very, very powerful person in terms of making an impact. And you inspire and build the aspiration to become like the mentor in many ways. And also, a bad example can work in the reverse. Supposing there's a boss who keeps yelling and shouting and, depending on hubris to dismiss all the ideas, you tell yourself, when I grow into a position of power, I will never display or demonstrate this kind of behavior. That's the last one. The core skills of a mentor is effective questioning, using a wide range of questions appropriately. I've seen in coaching sessions, especially abroad, I told you about these coaches who are very, very expensive. Their ability is to watch, their ability is to ask a question, a searching question. They talk maybe in the ratio of 1:4. Four is the ratio that the coachee talks and the coachees talk. 1 is the ratio on which the coach talks. Coach talks very little. Says a word here, says a word there, asks a question here, asks a question there, but doesn't talk much. Listens with great attention, writes. So this is a very important habit. Of course, you may have a tip-tap, top laptop going off there. But I'm a bit conventional in this. I find writing with a fountain pen, soft fountain pen, with lots of notes, really helps, because it helps you, first of all, in remembering what the person has said, and you remember that really well. Ensuring that the other person's agenda is followed, which is very important. You may go off on your own trip and start advising. Your mind can wander. Actually, keeping the mind away from wandering is a very, very big skill and a very big discipline. When I did my counseling course, I did it under a person called Father Fuster, and he is a Spanish priest, and extremely tough. If I sat in a chair, even if I scratched my ankle, he said, "Don't fidget. You're sitting there not for yourself, but you're sitting there for the other person. So sit still, sit straight." Now, body language in this is very important. If you hunch, if you hunker behind the table like a boss, or if you shake your leg, or if you keep twitching your ear, your nose, or the worst thing possible is looking at your mobile phone. Tick-tock, and doing mentoring. Laughable. Never even think about it. That's the most undignified way to receive a person, whether it is in a meeting or otherwise. I've seen some people in power doing that all the time, and it's pretty disgusting. So don't do that. because that is going to upset the other person totally, because you're not listening. You're making fun actually of the whole situation. And helping other people to provide focus and giving feedback is, sometimes a coach and a mentor needs to give uninhibited, straight from the gut feedback, which means you are valuing in a sense of self-pity, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so. Come out of it, come on, snap out of it. From tomorrow morning, get up at 6 o'clock, go for a jog with me, come on. Those are tough words. Sometimes they require thoda sa jhatka, as they call it, offering challenge as well as support. You must have been taught this zillions of times, so I'm not going to labor on it. It's called the Johari window. When you talk about the Johari window relationship, please understand that there's lots of stuff here which is unknown to you and unknown to the others. And as you grow in a company, right, you want me to go through these rectangles, or most of you have gone through it? Yeah, so I won't go through the detail, but I will tell you what I think is important in the context of coaching and mentoring. The more you know about the blind spots of the other person and disclose them like a mirror, the better you are as a mentor. Which means that you, first of all, in this journey of understanding what the other person is, or his inclinations or her inclinations are, you need to understand yourself too. According to me, the unknown square, which is there, the one which is completely dark, which is right below, not known to the mentor, not known to the mentee. What's your opinion? Do you think all of us need one? We definitely need one, otherwise you'll have something called existential neurosis. You must surprise yourself when you eat that piece of chocolate, saying, I didn't know I'm going to go delirious with joy. Imagine I've had the New Zealand chocolate, yummy, and you're behaving as if you're a small kid. You never knew that. So what? So it's a spot which is unknown. You may also not know that you're a great photographer or a great painter. These are very, very important in your life journey. And what the mentor does to the mentee is uncover some of these unknowns by giving and receiving feedback, especially giving feedback, and the mentee receiving feedback. And of course, the safe area, or the area which is the arena, becomes larger and larger. You become much more open with your habits of disclosing to people. When people say you're an open person, what does it mean? What does open person mean? A person who is open to ideas, a person who speaks their mind, a person who is not all the time a mystery with words and absolutely sheltered in what he or she says. An open person is somebody who gives advice, receives advice, gives an opinion, and so on. So you will learn in the Johari's window whether you have a very small, safe area. Of course, you need your own private area. If there's something that you don't want to disclose to people, so be it. Decide that with a certain. But with a mentee-mentor relationship, especially if you're going through some personal difficulties, you also learn to have the courage to disclose. Remember, there is nothing that you've gone through which is so surprising that it shocks the mentor. Nothing. Everybody goes through ups and downs. Be courageous, talk about it, but remember, talk about it only with a person who you trust. You don't go about with a board saying, I want feedback. You go to a person only whom you can trust. So that's what the Johari window is all about. And finally, questioning, clarifying to get the right kind of insights, setting improvement goals, very important. What happened there? The power of my hand shifted this way. So, questioning, clarifying, creating insights, setting goals, challenging the person, opening new horizons. Why can't you do this? Imagine these guys who are, again it touch. I think there's some kind of magic in that field. So it opens new horizons. Imagine a person who's failed in a startup. How does that person feel? The person may need deep mentoring. Why don't you try again? Or a person who's tried is doing it. So why don't you try that again? So opening up new horizons is an extremely important part of the mentoring activity. Confirming, building confidence. I want to say something which you guys may not like. I think India is a very comparison-oriented country. Look at your cousin, look at your uncle, look at your friend, look at him, look at her. came first in class. I think we do everything possible to destroy the self-confidence of a child. I'm not saying you guys are in that category. I'm sure you guys have huge self-confidence. But remember, when you reflect back, has enough been done to build your confidence? Or has enough been done to push it down? And has enough been done for you to take ownership? Or have you been told about luck, destiny and all that stuff? That's very important. A mentor makes you own up. A mentor makes you also take responsibility. And finally, focusing and testing, pulling thoughts together, checking reality, setting boundaries. So if a mentor feels that you're trying something which is absolutely, crazily unrealistic, person will tell you. Take it in small steps. Don't try to lose 15 kilos in 1 month. That's crazy. Do it in small steps. Do it in 6 monthly steps, or 1 year steps. So finally, mentorship is actually a relationship. It is not an activity. And if you are keen on building relationships, because what do you guys build in these 2 years or 1 year if you're first year students? You build networking skills. Build on your networking skills a little more and become great mentors, become great coaches. Thank you very much, because that's going to take you ahead in your life. I'd love to have some questions.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for a wonderful talk. I'm a PhD scholar, and as you were giving your talk, I was just reflecting that a few years ago I happened to speak to few coaches, and you mentioned in your slides that it is not necessary to have a approach to when you go for coaching. But when they were talking about coaching, they were telling that you should have an approach. Like they were ICF certified coaches, and they were saying that you should follow this grow model and this, and they were explaining about it.
Somebody asked me this question.
Do you have any thoughts on this?
So I have some friends who are from ICF, and I have lots of friends who are coaching certificates and so on. Whether it is coach or mentor, two things. First of all, you can have multiple mentors, you can have multiple coaches. You don't have to have one coach, one guru, one everything. You can have multiple. That's very, very important to me. Second is my personal belief. Since you asked me, my personal belief is, and no offense meant to those who have certifications, I don't believe a certification is necessary. I think it's a life skill. It's a new age skill. It's a 21st century skill. It's a skill which you grow by practice. It's a skill which is more important through experience and practice, and it is different strokes for different folks. Models give you single strokes for single kind of situations. I think coaching and mentorship have such a variety of challenges in which you put yourself as a mentor or a coach that you need to perhaps adapt yourself accordingly. It's like cricket. You have fast bowling, slow bowling, your spin, your seamers. You could be in any kind of situation, and therefore there's nothing like a life experience that can substitute it. And I think making your notes is your own certification. Making your notes of what you learned from each episode of mentoring and coaching. Having the discipline of going home, sitting down that night or sitting down the next morning and jotting down what exactly went through you, what exactly you learned, what was the unsaid from the body language, the twitching of the nose, or what did you see and what did you feel is more important than all the certificates.
So mainly it's about observation and giving the right feedback.
Listening, observation, the ability to ask the right questions without making it sound as if you're doing a Spanish Inquisition, but the ability to empathize, all this is really coaching.
Thank you, sir.
Also a great interpersonal chemistry also. People feel like coming to you. There's a gentleman who's raised a hand. Do we have only one mic in the hall?
Good evening, sir. My name is Sahil. So I'm from the PG Batch of 24. So in between your talk, you said that sometimes the mentor has to give some uninhibited, straight from the gut feedback to the mentee. So on those lines, if I may, if you could, it would be really exciting for us if you could share a small experience from your professional life, wherein as a mentor or a coach, you had to give feedback to the other person that was not appreciated by him.
Yeah, it's straight from the gut, not gut feel. Straight from the gut means without any inhibition, talking about whatever you feel. I have come across situations where people come to me because they didn't get promoted. And they feel that I have some magic wand just because my name is Yogi. You know, that I can transform a person into a fantastic leader who can crack any DC or. I tell them straight, I am not that person. I am not dash 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 coaching class. I can help you increase your stakes to a larger level to help you learn. I can challenge you. I can learn with you. I can fall down with you if we are learning something together. But don't get into this racket that I've come here. You come to me as the ex-HR head of one of India's largest companies to solve your problems in terms of cracking a particular issue. So, and the second practical example is when people come to you oozing with self-pity, poor me. There's a game called Poor Me in transaction analysis. So, I find that what is very interesting, and for the faculty, please correct me if I'm wrong, there's something called the Karpman drama triangle. In the Karpman drama triangle, you have three players. You have a victim, you have a persecutor, you have a rescuer. So this poor me person can come to you saying, look at this, I have tried to change the policy of the company, but nothing is happening. So who is the victim? You become the victim. You come to me, you're the HR person who's become the victim. The persecutor is the top management, they're not changing the policy. And the rescuer is who? You. Or I don't know who. So you tell the person, step out of the triangle and stop playing the game. You're neither victim, neither rescuer, neither persecutor. Become a person who's outside the drama triangle and be objective about it. Maybe ask the person who is rejecting your idea, why are you rejecting it? Is there something that I need to do additional? But don't play this victim. So it's useful to read about the Karpman drama triangle. All the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this talk, sir.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Our esteemed guest for his valuable insights and his immense contribution to our nation. Sir, thank you for sharing your experiences with us and inspiring us on this evening. On behalf of IIM Raipur and Chhattisgarh State, Professor Rajiv Prakash, Director IIT Bhilai, would now present our guest with a token of appreciation.
Moving forward to the next part of our event, we have a renowned author, Dr. Jameel Ahmed, sitting amongst us today. I would now request Professor Rashmi Shukla to please welcome Dr. Ahmed with a bouquet. Ahmed is the founder and CEO at Zerco International, a global integrated services in engineering and technology solutions platform. He brings diverse experience to the table with 23 years of international business expertise across domains like oil field services, global operations management, business development, and more. We are delighted to launch Dr. Ahmed's next book, The Trilogy of Leadership, which talks about how leaders change the world around them. He was inspired to write this book after tracing the remarkable journey of 15 prolific leaders who changed his life. I now request Dr. Ahmed to please tell us more about his book.
How's everyone doing? It's a great to be here. I'm quite honored to meet you all. Actually, in fact, you guys are the leaders of tomorrow, so I'm pretty excited to talk to you. To begin my story, it's very humble, very. I started in a very in a root level, um, and obviously, yeah. Before I start and introduce myself, if you guys have any question, please feel free to stop me, ask me anything, so we can make it more interactive session. Um, so, being a leader myself, at the startup company that I did 2 years ago, as we had a great session from Shri Yogi Sir talking about mentoring, coaching, and all those the prerequisites required for a leader. I think I was just listening to him, and it's quite fortunate to be here to listen to him and understand the 45 years of his experience that's been shared today. Um, for me, as a startup company, there's been a lot of struggles, a lot of challenges that I found. Obviously, when you guys do the same, you'll also see how it is. Sometimes it's difficult, but yet it's the passion that drives forward. One thing that kept me move on was the passion towards being to do something unique, to create a footprint, and then ability to do something that is for the society that we live in. So I failed a few times, again failed. Finally, with this company called Raipur International 6 years ago, I was able to, after a lot of research work and learning processes, I was able to come up with this idea and then slowly take it into different levels and globalize it. And part of that, after 5 years, once I came up with, a book called Business Management and Leadership Strategies in the Competitive Market. Now, the reason I came up with that book was that, there's a lot of topics, elements that a business person could take advantage of. And obviously, there's 15 chapters, and each chapter talks about the basics and detail about every business possibilities that we could grab upon. 3 years later, I'm here with another book, Trilogy of Leadership. Again, what inspired me is about the leadership around us. People who have tried to struggle a lot and came up with some idea to create a new world around us. And I was quite fascinated, and I wanted to learn about their story, their journey, their childhood, their early days. And the Trilogy of Leadership actually came up with 3 things actually: lead, legacy, and leverage. And I'm sure you guys all agree with me. All these three things keep us move forward, right, for a leader. They come up with a plan to lead, and then they would leave a legacy behind, and then they would also leverage the in and around their scenario, and that would stay forever. Sorry. So the 15 leaders that I chose, they were from 1800 onwards until as of now. And everything, when I look back their history, their challenges, their contributions, we see that they have done so many remarkable things that we all need to appreciate. And I wanted to write in my own way and put it all in one book where people can really read, pick it from anywhere. I mean, you don't have to sequentially read it. It has leaders from technology, industries, automobiles. It has leaders from e-commerce platforms, metal industries. As I told you, the leaders from 1800 onwards. And they have left a legacy that we all can always think of and follow their footprint. And couple of things that excited me was that also that when they, one thing I found common in the whole process is that no matter what you take, any leaders, there is one thing common is that they all work very hard, they're very passionate about what they do. and they always wanted to get the outcome and finally, succeed. They never step backwards. They always push towards themselves to a path where they can really achieve and succeed. And that's one thing I found, even though there were leaders that I've come up with or highlighted, came up with, where they were born in a wealthy family. They had their own ways and financially they were fit to run their company or do themselves. But at the same time, there were also leaders who came from a poor background, right? So initially, you can see that every combination of leaders were born and they were doing their own part. So there's nothing that's stopping us from becoming a leader. And I think you guys all are going to be the leaders of tomorrow. The world is watching you guys and the world is looking for you. I'm sure you will also create a lot of possibilities and newer trials in whatever you guys do. Anyway, I will take a few questions if you guys have any. But before that, I want to thank all the faculties and professors and Mr. Dean here, Dr. Jain sir, and Ram sir, everyone who has helped me here, made my trip very hospitable, and I'm enjoying it. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm here to answer. No question. Okay. All right. So since no questions, I think this is the book that I have to launch here. I'm happy to do that. Thank you.
I would request Mr. Yogi Sriram to please come to the stage and launch Dr. Jamil's book. As we come to the end of this wonderful evening, I would like to invite Professor Ashapurna ma'am to deliver the vote of thanks. Ma'am, please.
I would like to express our institution's sincere gratitude to our esteemed speaker, Shri Yogi Sriram, for his insightful talk. Also, it is a delight to talk to you, sir. Thank you for coming here and for the talk. I extend my thanks to Dr. Jamil for making us a part of his book launch. Wishing him the very best for his new book and all for his future endeavors. My thanks to the guests of the evening who have graced the occasion with their presence. Now, to make the 5th Gyan Varsha intellectual series a success, we have a group of people putting in their effort, continuous effort and time. It goes without saying that it is our director, Professor Ram, and our Dean Academics, Professor Kamal's deliberation that we have this Gyan Varsha series rolling. We cannot thank enough Dr. Ketan and Vivek for all the hard work they put into planning the event and the seamless conduct of the same. My thanks to the Gyan Varsha committee members Dr. Arunima and Dr. Mrinal for their contribution and effort. Special thanks to, of course she's not here, to Dr. Sunita for joining in to help us with the event today. We always owe it to the IT department and our administration to make the event of this scale happen. Thank you. Thanks to the students of the Provokta committee for their unwavering support. Thanks to each one of you for your participation and presence in today's events, my faculty colleagues and dear students. So this is the closure to our 5th Gyan Varsha, the Rockstars of India. We look forward to your participation and support in the final chapter of this season that will commence on 2nd of March 2024. Kindly save the date and pass the word. Thank you and good evening.